figure in American Jewry I want to speak about is someone named Mr. Nessim Alhadeff. He was born actually in the year 1884. He passed away in 1950. He did. So I think he was born actually on June the 14th of that year. He was born in Greece, in the Rhodes. He was born in, and he passed away eventually in Seattle, in Washington, United States of America. He's a key person in, let's just say, American Sephardic, Spanish Portuguese, or Sephardi Jewry in of itself. So I thought we would speak about him because he was one of the first people in Seattle, which will become like a, let's say, a center place for Jewish life, synagogue life in America in of itself. Now, it's actually interesting. We're going to speak about his wider family in of itself. He was the wife of Mrs. Rosa Alhadeff, if I'm not mistaken. He was the son of David Joseph Alhadeff and Caden Miriam Alhadeff, if I'm not mistaken. He'd have other brothers, including Bochor Yosef Alhadeff, Rachamim Yaakov Alhadeff, Solomon, or Sam David Alhadeff, Asher Alhadeff, Morris Alhadeff, and various, I think he had 3 other brothers also, we have to point out over here. He passed away in 1950, about 76 years ago. I want to speak a bit about him and his connection to the Seattle Jewish community, because he does huge amounts in, let's say, American Jewry right at the start of the 20th century. So I think it was in 1904, Nessim Alhadeff made the journey from Rhodes to Seattle, and within 3 years, all of his brothers and many others would actually follow him. So he was like one of the forerunners, let's say, incorporating Seattle Jewry in himself. By the year 1909, the first steps, let's say, were taken at a formal organization, were taken at that point in time. It was moved by the leadership of someone named Chaim de Leon, the original group of the Rhodeslists that formed the Kupa, Otzer, Dalim, and Shea Rhodes, if I'm not mistaken, the Fund for the Aid of the Poor of the people of Rhodes in itself. Now, in 1909, there was Solomon Alhadeff as a treasurer, as a president. Nessim Alhadeff was the treasurer, and someone named Harry Franco was the secretary. There were great funds raised from within the group and were sent to the needy Jewish community of Rhodes. Let's say there were various different disputes that actually took place in the early years of the organization. I think at that point in time, robust debates, and there was a mediator, someone named Rabbi Samuel Koch. He was of Temple de Hirsch, that will actually come in at that point in time and let's say steady the ship at that point in time. And they came together. The name Kupa Ezra Bessaroth of Rhodes, and I think there will be an article of incorporation will actually be merged together at one point in time in the year 1914. I think in 1915 they would, at that point in time, just remember, Nessim Alhadeff was the first philanthropist over there and would do huge amounts, and we're going to speak more about him in due course. We're going to speak a bit about just a history of this synagogue in of its own right, just for a few minutes, because we don't really speak much about the Sephardic American Jewish history so much on this series. We want to do a lot more videos on that. I think it was in the year 1915, 2 lots were purchased on the corner of the 15th and East 1st Street for about $7,000. I think it was for the Yom Noraim, the high holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, respectively, and that was in the year 1916. There was a Washington Hall rented, and late, I think in the afternoon of Yom Kippur, before the service entered, people, the Mitpalelim over there, had to vacate, I think, the hall to make room for another group that had resolved for a different reason in of its own right. And I think very interesting. I think they would actually have to pray the next Yom Kippur inside the place. So very interesting. We're just speaking about the history of this this synagogue in of its own right. And originally, I think there were bazaars that were planned. There were people, Americans, that were involved with the synagogue, and including someone named David Lippman, who would actually help within regards to, and many members of this Temple de Hirsch synagogue, especially the women over there, would actually help within regards to merchandisers and selling various different items in of itself, and they would bake goods over there, make big amounts of money, and dedicate it, I think, help within regards to construction and dedication of the synagogue in of its own right. This was a synagogue that had incorporated a lot of activities for the women of the Neshei of the synagogue in themselves. In the early days of this synagogue, which Mr. Alhadeff really was, like, let's say, one of the first pioneers of this place in itself, they organized themselves into an auxiliary. The first present woman of this synagogue was someone named Mrs. Leah Mosafer. She would be followed by her daughter, Bolisa Rosa Franco, if I'm not mistaken. Franco was actually a famous family in Greece, and among the earlier presents were people like Sarah Mosafer, Bolisa Esther Angel, Rose Alhadeff. So Rose Alhadeff was a wife of Nessim Alhadeff, who we're speaking about today. Serena Cohen. So these were key people. So you can see this Alhadeff family was a very key family, let's just say, in of itself, in Seattle, in Washington, let's say, during himself. I think the Ladies Auxiliary was officially launched in the year 1916, and its members, I think, actually in current day still bake Sephardic delicacies, and they still hold this annual bazaar, I think, in the community. The culture of the synagogue has a very rich culture also. I think the social life centered around the synagogue in general in Seattle, and they lived close together in Seattle Central District over there. I think it's interesting. I think many plays were performed by and for the community. Usually it was in Ladino until World War II, if I'm not mistaken. As early of the year 1914, there was someone named Maurice Hanan who translated the Molière comedy into Ladino over there. There was Leon Behar would write and direct a number of plays. Let's just say, I think among them the Dreyfus Affair, for example, Joseph and His Brothers, and Love and Religion. I think that was in March 1927, respectively. Who were the community, let's say, figures? We're going to speak about Nessim Alhadeff, who was the first one over there, but now we're speaking about the Ezra Bessaroth, the synagogue itself, which he came into. I think in 1918 there was a Reverend David J. Behar would be the Chazan, if I'm not mistaken, and I think this would last for many, many years. He would actually be there over there. He strove to ensure that, let's say, this community of the Ezra Bessaroth would remain faithful to its time-honored traditions. It's a kehillah that really, let's just say, it brings about traditions in of its own right. And then there was someone named Rabbi Isador Kahan. He would come in 1939, in April 1939, and he arrived in Seattle with his wife and two daughters to serve as a rabbi for both the Ezra Bessaroth and Sephardic Bikor Holim, those two synagogues in of its own right. Rabbi Kahan actually would alternate between the two synagogues over there, one Shabbat at the famous Bikor Holim and one at Ezra Bessaroth. And let's just say the goal of this venture was to, let's say, that there was two merging sister congregations, so really he had like an integral point within regards to that. I think Rabbi Kahan had a very great pedigree, let's just say, in the rabbinate of rabbinic training. He was educated, I think, and I think he was part of the University of Zurich also, let's just say, and he would serve the congregation until his retirement in the year 1959. He passed away in Sukkot in the year 1961. So let's talk about education of the community in of itself. In the early 1930s, the Sephardic congregations would consolidate their schools into the Sephardic religious school over there, and Albert Levy of New York was brought in to head the school. And I think in the late 1940s, the school was dissolved, and Reverend Behar continued to provide instruction for the children in his own private school. I think there would be a cemetery also as part of this community. Remember, Nessim Alhadeff was the first real person that would come, and you can see how it will blossom as time goes on. The first Rhodes Silly burial were in Herzl Cemetery. When Sephardic Bikor Holim purchased the ground near the Washeli, it was an arrangement, I think, that was made by the grave sites, was sold to someone named Ezra Bessaroth members as the need arose. And in 1920, I think a subsidiary group of Ezra Bessaroth was formed called the Havat Shalom. They're also known as Sociedad de Hubas. I think it was in 1933. This group would come under the leadership of Tzaddik Angel, Jacob de Leon, Behor Solem, Mike Elkanah, and Reverend Behar at that point in time. And they would purchase the cemetery ground, and they would presently, I think, the Sephardic Brotherhood Cemetery. What was the Sephardic Brotherhood? That would also materialize over here. It was formed, let's just say, as an amalgamation in 1935 of the Sephardic Progressive Fraternity, the Shalom Aleichem, and the Avat Shalom, three social groups of the Sephardic community of Seattle. It will be over there. And let's just say, I think that Ezra Bessaroth would then move to the Seward Park as, let's say, the inner city location of the Ezra Bessaroth community. It would, let's say, begin to dwindle a little bit come out the mid-1950s. Many congregants began to move in other places also. They would see possible dispersion of a tight-knit community, and all of the Central District congregational leaders acted early and acted fast. I think there was a meeting, if I'm not mistaken, of membership was held at the Leshy-based Corinthian Yach Club originally in 1956, and many, let's say, of the mature members over there would recall Reverend Behar's impassioned plea of this specific famous meeting. Then another famous rabbi will come into the community, someone named Rabbi Abraham Shalem, I think in 1959 this would be, and he would serve the congregation for 3.5 years before going to Mexico. Then they'll get an Ashkenazic rabbi, Rabbi Rabbi William Greenberg in 1962 in September would come in and would serve until the year 1990. He was amazed by the congregation and would dazzle them with great, let's say, inspiring sermons. He was a pioneer teacher at the Northwest Yeshiva High School. And he would establish also, let's say, several adult learning programs in Seattle, and they would watch specifically the 4 children over there. He had children, Sarah, Donnie, Dena, and Ari. They would grow up over there, and it's very interesting. One of the highlights was the various different kiddushas he would host, especially during the festivals of Pesach and Sukkot over there respectively. So very, very interesting. I think his wife's name was Rabbanit Rosa also, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I think he passed away in 2007 on the 14th of Sivan, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the synagogue itself would give him a huge amount of respect. And his memorial service, I think, in the Ezra Bessaroth sanctuary was standing room only, with all of the major Seattle rabbis and community leaders in attendance. Then who would become the next rabbi over here of the Ezra Bessaroth? It would be Rabbi Isaac Azo. So the next chazan will be Isaac Azozeh. He would be the next chazan over here. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring about Nessim Alhadeff, and we're also speaking about the Sephardic Jewish community also, because he really was a pioneer, one of the first people over there. I think it was in the early 1960s. Rob Beher would seek to retire at that point in time, and as of June 1965, Robert J. Franco will contact a great talent of the name Isaac Azozeh, and would persuade this great talented chazan to actually come to the High Holy Day services to perform, and he was hired on a full-time basis by the congregation, I think come what, March 1966, and had been a huge presence, as to say, in the community, and would even eventually, was so great, published of CDs and Sephardic Sidurim, and after his retirement in the year 2000. They obviously had famous youth directors also at this synagogue over the years, especially Rabbi David Angel, if I'm not mistaken. And there was advent of a Reverend David J. Behar youth program, I think in the late 1970s, and very, very interesting. They'd have famous youth directors over there. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Yamin Levi, was the spiritual leader from 1990 through 2000. He had great youthful energy, let's just say, in his own self. I think I've actually listened to his class online, if I'm not mistaken. It's actually interesting. He would lead and inspire the community in of itself, and it would grow in size and spirit. It was under Rabbi Levi's direction, let's just say, that the congregation adopted a family from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, in the former Soviet Union. And very, very interesting. They're actually reading the website itself where I'm reading from. Little did we know that this noble gesture would be the beginnings of a significant Bukharian community in our congregation. A new excitement and vibrancy was the mark of the Ezra Bessaroth in the 1990s. And the next rabbi that will come in will be Rabbi Salomon Cohen Scally of this community. And I think they will come in from Barcelona, Spain, in the fall of 2001, and bring his wife, Rabbi Raquel, along with his children also, and he focused, as I say, the congregation of the spiritual roots while building ever stronger ties with the state of Israel. And he would complete his service till December 2009, and he would eventually move to the East Coast. And then I think, very, very much interesting enough, I think there'll be in the year 2010, there'll be a famous ceremony at that point in time. Let's just say a mosaic platform inspired by the unique tiling on the floor of the Kahal Shalom synagogue in Rhodes was installed in the remodeled courtyard, and let's just say as a stunning replica of the Rhodes Holocaust monument. I think Rabbi Mark Angel and Dr. Aaron Rodriguez would actually come in this historic celebration. I think it was held on August the 22nd in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Another rabbi would join in 2011. Rabbi Ron Ami Myers joined the congregation, and him and his wife, Rabbi Miriam, and their children, and they bring great energy. He would eventually go back to Israel in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But let's go back now to Nessim Alhadeff. We're speaking about the community history over here. So who was Nessim Alhadeff? There's an excellent article on the WSIHS.org website over here, Discovering Seattle in of itself. They actually put some pictures of him. So they title it the Pacific Fish and Oyster Company. What is that? So Nessim Alhadeff, I think in 1904, became the first Sephardic Jew to immigrate to Seattle from Rhodes. So very interesting. So he would actually be the, let's just say, in a way, the founder of the community over here. He sold fish out of a basket, and then on a push cart, and eventually a horse and buggy. It's interesting. Mr. Nessim would speak fluent Greek and make it very easy to connect with him with the Pike Place market vendors who had immigrated from Greece over there. Let's just say he opened the Palace Fish Company along Seattle's waterfront in 1912. He sold products to his market contacts, to local restaurants and to grocery stores, and had customers, interfaith ones, not just from the Jewish religion, also from them. He had three sons. His three sons, Charlie, Jack, and Ike, they would eventually run the family's seafood business under the name the Pacific Fish and Oyster Company. The brothers would distribute, let's say, salmon and halibut nationwide, buy fish directly off the boats and dock to all seaport towns. So he's famous fishmonger, let's just say, in America, and would operate salmon canneries in the states of Washington and Alaska. Very interesting enough. I think Charles Alhadeff would actually give a whole testimony with regards to him. So let's speak about, I think his father, David Alhadeff. I think what's his father, if I'm not mistaken. So Alhadeff is obviously a famous family name. I think he was born on the island of Rhodes when it was part of the Ottoman Empire. Now, David Alhadeff was actually a baker and an owner of a general store. His wife, Kaden, were the progenitors of many of Seattle's Alhadeffs. One of them, so if that's the parents, we're talking about Nessim Alhadeff over here. So Nessim was the one that pioneered the family's immigration to America. So Nessim Alhadeff has a huge role in American Jewry. In 1904, he followed Greek friends from the nearby island of Leros, he was in Leros before, to Seattle, and then expanded the wholesale fish industry in this city. So this successful business endeavor enabled, let's just say, Nessim Alhadeff to return to Rhodes in 1907, where he would meet his wife over there, Rabbinit Rosa Israel. And by 1914, once Rhodes had become, let's say, the place of the Italian Empire, Mr. Alhadeff, at that point in time, it was part of the Italian Empire, he sponsored his entire family to immigrate to Seattle. Brilliant gesture, big family. The 9 Alhadeff children included Behor, Joseph, Rachamim, Solomon, Nessim, Asher, Moshe, also known as Morris, Albert, George, and Estria, if I'm not mistaken. And David and Keden's descendants continue, let's just say, they would shape Jewish organizations and civic life in Seattle. Their legacy of the Alhadeff family is felt in congregation Ezra Bessaroth and Temple de Hirsch Sinai, which I think happens to be actually a Reform synagogue in the Capitol Hill over there. So they would have, along with Ezra Bessaroth, which is an Orthodox congregation, it seems like all denominations of the Jewish faith will actually be inspired from this family in itself. The family made its mark on Pike Place Market, Longer Crest Racetrack, the Majestic Bay Theatre, and I think finally there was the Isaac Alhadeff Foundation, which has generously sponsored the Sephardic study program since its inception. Members of the Alhadeff, Baruch, Ovadia, and Sharon families have shared materials related to the Alhadeff family. There's actually a whole collection, highlights with regards to Alhadeff collection. I think Moshe Morris and Rebecca Bohora, Alhadeff's wedding celebration, you can actually see from March the 30th, 1920. It's actually chronicled over there. That's one thing. I'm actually looking at a picture now at Mr. Nessim Alhadeff. I think there's a picture, a photo of him, which was featured in Seattle's Jewish transcript from the January 13th, 1939, which accompanied articles in which lauded Mr. Nessim for his charitable efforts, which included, let's say, donations, a new pulpit chair, let's just say, for example, and he did a lot of interfaith between both Jews and Christians during the Second World War, which was key over there. Let's just say at that point in time. I think it was the 100th anniversary of the Ezra Bessaroth congregation was on August 22nd, 2010. And very interesting, it was in 1909, as we said before, where the formal organization was originally made. The leadership originally was from Chaim de Leon. The original group of Rodelices it was formed during Sukkot in 1909, and it was called, as we said before, the Kupa, Ozer Dalim and She Rhodes, the Fund for the Aid of the Poor People of Rhodes. And Solomon Alhadeff originally was the president, Nessim Alhadeff was the treasurer, as we pointed out before, and Harry Franco was the secretary. And the funds, which was raised within the group and was sent to needy Jewish community of Rhodes at that point in time. This celebration in 2010, the congregation will actually unveil the courtyard, a replica of the Holocaust memorial located in the square of the martyr Jews on the island of Rhodes. So they'll do really much things, and they actually, on the website, it features, let's just say, the pictures community. So friends, this was a special edition over here about Mr. Nessim Alhadeff, who was a famous philanthropist in Seattle of his time. So everyone, you're tuning in live, welcome to our community over here, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you descend from any of the rabbis or chazanim we are speaking about today, please let me know and send me an email. Wishing you all a great day, and thanks for watching. Take care.
Beautiful.